Torture Garden Podcast.
All right, welcome to Torture Garden. I am Scott,
I'm Jimmy.
and today we are going to talk more in depth about something we have mentioned a lot in our videos, but never really dove into head first. We often talk about different contexts and different different discussions about lyricism, whether it's what do we think about the politics of lyricism, what do we even care about lyricism in general, what do we consider good and bad lyricism, and of course this depends on each genre. We never talked about just our general thoughts about lyrics, because I think it's one of those things that is I've reviewed music for a while now, and it's something that has come up, depending on the different albums I've reviewed, to varying degrees, especially in genres like hip hop. And I don't know, like it is a very divisive topic, because not only just what constitutes good lyricism, obviously that is controversial, but just how important lyricism is in general, which is kind of odd to say, because I listen to quite a bit of instrumental music, but the vast majority of popular, like well discussed music has lyrics, especially truly popular modern genres like hip hop. Yet I feel like it doesn't, in some ways, doesn't get the credit it deserves, but also isn't as big a deal as the music. So just suffice that to say, we just want to dive into what we think of lyricism, and just kind of have a discussion about all the topics I mentioned. What genres does it matter more than others in, and does it matter overall?
Yeah, I think it's worth adding here that this is a very gray area.
It is, for sure.
Because I mean, despite it being opinions, it's also, I think it's a matter that's dependent on genre. Just like you previously said, like I think in hip hop it's probably more prevalent, or at least
Yeah.
our focus on it is more prevalent than it is compared to like a death metal album.
Yes, for sure.
So, yeah, it's definitely like, to say, like, do lyrics matter? It's sort of like a yes and no type of question, because I mean I honestly, I think, even beyond the genres, I think it's probably most dependent on what you look for in music. And I personally don't really look for lyrics in music. A like it's the music that is most important to me, because if I want good lyrics, I might as well just read like a good poem. I mean, not to say that there are bad lyricists, or I mean, there are bad lyricists, but not to say that I dislike some of my favorite bands' lyrics. It's just that like, I go to them for different reasons. Like, even in hip hop, actually, like I was actually writing an article on this the other day, that, like, what connected me with someone like Idea wasn't necessarily his lyrical, like, the content of his lyrics, but rather the way he was able to control his flow,
Yeah.
and how fast he was able to go, and sort of things like that were more rhythmic and dealt more in a musical direction. And then after I got, when I dove deeper into his lyrics, I actually really began to like them. Like, Birth of a Fish is a really, really interesting track. If anybody is interested, it's an odd little track, but it's really cool. I think I think what makes his music so cool is just because he got a start in, like, the rap battle scene. So, like, for a long time he was just making up this shit off the top of his head, which I always find really cool. But I've talked enough for right now.
Yeah, I think for me, even with hip hop, and just my general view on lyrics is, I mean, I think hip hop is obviously a very lyrical driven genre, and then there are other genres, like, kind of post-hardcore, screamo, kind of like the La Dispute, the very kind of more poetic and verbose types
Yeah.
of genres and stuff. But lyrics can't compensate for bad music, and I feel like this isn't always the case, but I guess good music can compensate for bad lyrics more so than the other way around, even
Yeah,
in hip hop. So
definitely.
if you have, like for example, Schoolboy Q, I have a lot of nostalgia for him. I bought a cheap copy of Oxymoron, which is an album I listened to a lot in college. I think he's a pretty, like, at best he's mediocre. Like at best his lyrics
Like,
are
yeah, as a lyricist.
okay, but his beats are really nice, and the way he's able to rhyme, and some of the song concepts, and some of the way he's able to frame hooks and whatnot, and the verses are creative, so I like that.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so even though I really don't care about what he raps about, and a lot of times what he raps about is to me like a little too misogynistic, or just not really the type of subject matter I like to listen to. But then on the flip side, you have someone like Immortal Technique, who I really like. Some of the political topics he tackles. He's obviously a very talented rapper. The production quality on his albums and just kind of the style of beats he chooses, I don't really care for. So for me to listen to an entire album with music that just doesn't vibe with me, I mean, as much as I like his lyrics, I would rather listen to bad lyricism and some great beats that are catchy to listen to and fun in the car, than to like you said, I'd rather just read his lyrics, or like read an article on these topics, than sit through something where the music just doesn't engage me. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I would rather listen to instrumental hip hop than like spoken word. Like I feel like
Yeah.
instrumentals would hold up better for me than just listening to spoken word
Spoken
no
word
music.
can be really draining after a while.
Exactly.
But like, I mean, not to down people who do it, because I think it can be done really well. Like,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Gil Scott Heron is a great example.
Yeah.
But I couldn't listen to an entire Gil Scott Heron album.
No.
Yeah. But like, it is cool when it's used, sparingly. Yeah, it's funny that I guess we're gonna still take stick with hip hop, but I don't know if you noticed this week, but I was re-listening to Pimp a Butterfly.
I did see that, on Spotify. Yeah.
And because we've had this Kendrick conversation before on this thing many times, and I always want to revisit artists I don't like, or artists I'm not a huge fan of, just to see if my opinion maybe has changed a little bit, and that their music is a little more like palatable to me. And I going back to it, like I still not a fan of it, but I do like the lyrics a little bit more, because what's that one where it's like shit ain't gonna change until you wash your ass.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. The one with Snoop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a cool lyric. I think Blacker the Berry is a great track.
Black of the Berry is
on
an
its own.
awesome song. Yeah.
But I could probably work with Kendrick's lyrics for the most part. Well, what's that track after? What's the second track after Wesley's Theory? Like this dick ain't.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
that's
I'm
a goofy track.
okay. Like,
Yeah, that's a
but
goofy one.
But mostly the reasons that I don't listen to Kendrick's music isn't because of his lyrical content. It's mostly because of the production, and I'm just not a big fan of it.
Yeah.
And just sort of the way it's not even the production quality. It's more the way he structures tracks, and sort of writes hooks. Like Wesley's Theory is a great example. Just like that way that he's flowing during just like the main verse, is I don't really like that type of rhythm that he uses. So like it's very much like a music over lyrics. And I'm trying to think of an example where lyrics would actually be over music. And I really can't think of any. I think some people might say like Bob Dylan, but I mean I disagree. But
Yeah.
it's like everybody points to him as a great lyricist, and I'm not gonna deny that, but like guys, his voice is not for everybody. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up Kendrick because he's actually a great example. I would say, in terms of like the impact and just the scope and the concept, I think "To Pimp a Butterfly" is a, quote unquote better album than "Good Kid, Mad City." But any day of the week, I would prefer to listen to "Good Kid, Mad City" over "To Pimp a Butterfly" because even though I like,
are better production.
yeah, exactly. I think the subject matter and the concept on "To Pimp a Butterfly" is better, more fleshed out, more impactful, and related to social issues of today, and it's great to listen to his creativity in dealing with that. But just musically, "To Pimp a Butterfly" is just not as enjoyable for me as "Good Kid, Mad City," and
Yeah.
I feel like he tells a compelling story with "Good Kid, Mad City," but also has great production, which is why.
You know what really disappoints me though about To Pimp a Butterfly's production is that because like the amount of great producers who were working on it, and like like Flying Lotus, had such a huge hand in that album, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, like what could have been like.
Yeah, and it's not that the beats are bad, but they're just, I mean, they just don't hit me as hard as some of the beats on
Yeah.
"Good Kid, Mad City" are like fantastic.
Oh yeah, I mean, Backseat Freestyle.
Exactly, like they're so creative. I feel like all that creativity is there with "Good Kid, Mad City," and like I enjoy the beats and the lyrics. But just to kind of switch genres, like you said,
Yeah.
with folk music, a lot of people do point to those storytellers like Bob Dylan, where even though the music's pretty skeletal, a lot of times it's just kind of acoustic guitar, chords, maybe some piano, some really sparse instrumentation. It's really about the storytelling, and I feel like that's not. I mean, I get where people come from when they say that, but the music is just as important. Like for example, Sufjan Stevens, with his newest album, Carrie and Lowell. The kind of the lyricism in the story and like the pain he's talking about, the fallout of the death of his mother and the sadness, like that really is the spotlight. What he's talking about, the lyrics, the stories, and just kind of feeling the pain he's feeling. But the music underneath is also gorgeous, and it's simple, but it's well composed, and it really complements the lyricism and whatnot. I feel like the same can be said about Nick Drake. His lyricism, his
Yeah.
poetry is very impactful and tough and just painful to listen to. But he's an incredible, like the way that he
Yeah.
crafts, guitar lines and his playing is so great. It's not just
I mean, he was a virtuoso.
He was, for sure.
Just on the instrument alone. So yeah, you sort of bring up an interesting idea, like because I think we've had something similar to this before, that we've talked about like singer songwriters before, and I think with folk, I think we get singer songwriter music and folk sometimes mixed up because I think the two can often combine
yeah,
into one. But like I think a singer songwriter, like the impact doesn't come from the music or the lyrics, it comes from the combination of the two.
yeah,
Which is sort of why like Tom Waits is such a compelling singer songwriter, because he manages to create these really interesting situations and then back it very well musically.
yeah,
But it's at the crux where they talk about. I think with other genres, it's a little different. Even in folk, but I can't really say I'm a huge I'm not an expert on folk at all. If I'm an expert on any genre, it's probably like jazz.
Yeah.
Which has
which
little to no lyrics.
often, I mean, unless it's vocal jazz. Yeah.
Which
I
I
think-
think I do a lot of vocal jazz. But,
I think that's actually a very good point to make because while, yeah, I think it's just because a lot of singer songwriters do, you think of just kind of that skeletal folk and that just acoustic folk, which is a lot of, just like popular, like Bob Dylan, for example. You have like, kind of folksy, almost Americana vibe, but they're not necessarily the same at all, in terms, or they don't have to be. But yeah, I'm trying to think because obviously with metal, I mean, metal lyricism can often be very, poignant and well written. They take a lot of inspiration from literature and whatnot, but
and then it can also be Cannibal Corpse.
exactly. But to that point, a lot of times with more extreme metal, frankly, I mean, people say like, how do you even understand the lyrics? It's like, well, you kind of don't. I mean, sometimes you can, but it's really about the the effect of the. And people have asked me like, why don't they just sing? And it's like, well, because if you had like singing over death metal, that would sound like bad. That wouldn't.
I don't know. I would actually like to hear what that would sound like. I think it's more just I think it's like you said, it's about effect. It's sort
if
of
it
like
fits.
It's like using like delay in like a dub song. Like, of course you're going to use delay in a dub song. Like that's the whole fucking point, or look, using acoustic instruments in a folk album. Like, it's just like duh. Like it's what makes what defines the genre. But I mean, genre lines are gray at best, very blurry at best.
Exactly. It's kind of like I think it was the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon or whatever. He had Ed Sheeran do like like pop the folk renditions of like modern rap songs.
No, thank you.
Okay, well, it was just supposed to show like how goofy it sounded, and it was so weird to hear Ed Sheeran kind of like his nice voice and just some like simple like folk acoustic stuff and like rapping about like all these bitches in the club and whatnot. Like, it was just, and I actually showed that to my girlfriend. She's like, okay, now I kind of get what you're saying with the fact that certain lyrical styles and vocals and don't fit with certain types of music.
Actually, if you really want to have a laugh with something similar to that, check out Richard Cheese. He's like a lounge singer that only covers pop songs basically, but he does it all in like this very Frank Sinatra-ish lounge style. So like he's done like like Closer, Nine Inch Nails Closer. I wanna fuck you like an animal.
Yeah, there's what's it called? I think it's I'll have to look it up. What is it? It's like something jukebox. But there is a group that they do a lot of videos on YouTube where they'll do that and do kind of like 20s lounge jazz renditions. Oh God, I gotta find what that's called. But frankly, it's more novel than anything.
Oh yeah,
to me,
it's
it
definitely novelty.
It doesn't actually fit. But yeah, I really struggle to. I mean, lyrics can absolutely enhance music. Like, I think with Joy Division, especially, I think his lyricism and his delivery, even though obviously he doesn't have a great singing voice, his delivery enhances the music and matches it so well. Especially one of my favorite juxtapositions is Isolation, the second track on Closer, where it's kind of this dancey 80s pop beat.
That is a weird song.
It's like very upbeat and kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And then his vocals come in, his lyrics, and he's talking about isolation. He doesn't know who he is, and it's such a stark contrast that to me feels like this album came out, I believe, it was either 80 or 81, because Unknown Pleasures came out in 79, and it was kind of to me a statement about how the onset of synth pop in the 80s and all this bright commercialism and MTV and all this stuff was coming on in the future, and he still didn't know who he was. This new age where technology and television and music and entertainment was starting to get wrapped up and evolve, and he is still feeling isolated, not sure who he is in this world. And I feel like that's a really effective use of lyricism that enhances the track. And then I mentioned Sufjan Stevens with Carrie and Lowell. There's a song in there called 4th of July where he is, I mean, the instrumentation is gorgeous, and then he talks about basically he sings about having a conversation with his mom who's on her deathbed, and like that is just cuts you deeply, and it cuts you so intensely. And then along the same lines, I think we've talked about before, Mount Eerie, a crow. I think a crow looked.
Yeah, a crow looked at me.
Yeah, the music on that is frankly kind of okay. It's not the best folk or like type of singer songwriter type stuff I've heard. And then the delivery is more like spoken word, and it kind of is an interesting listen musically. It doesn't really jive as well as other folk albums, but the lyrics in that truly cut. He goes over and talks about the death of his wife in such excruciating and painful detail.
I not to completely go off track here, but I was just thinking like people really seem to like Bjork's lyrics, and I've never actually really cared either way for them. Even with the new albums, like that are all about like her breakup with Matt Barney,
Mm-hmm.
and like I just never like I don't know like maybe it's because the delivery is like a little close to spoken word that maybe it makes me care less. But I've just like what makes a Bjork album for me are like like it's more like her voice and her phrasing and the production as opposed to what she's saying, which is like sort of like why I like Dead Can Dance, because like they don't always talk about anything. Sometimes it's just like nonsense.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. And then another great example is there's a folk artist called Grouper, who she
Oh yeah,
does
yeah, Grouper.
extraordinarily ethereal, a lot of feedback, a lot of reverb and whatnot. And she has lyrics to her music that are I've read them, and they're very moving and personal and stuff like that. But she sings in such an ethereal way, and in such a kind of mystical, ghostly kind of effect that you don't necessarily hear the content of what she's saying, but it fits so well with the music. And even though you can't hear the lyrics, the delivery and the way she's singing and the certain words you can pick out really fit.
Yeah, I actually a really good example of that is Mars Volta. I was
Yes.
thinking of that track, Elvia Lavasquez,
Yeah.
of Francis the Mute, which I just like. That song is just so incredible. And it's, like most of the lyrics are in Spanish, but and I know a little bit of Spanish, so I can sort of parse through some of it. But it's sort of it's more how the lyrics juxtapose to the song and how they work with the song, as opposed to what lyrics say. Because I mean, like Mars Volta, I don't want to say that they talk about nonsense, like, because they don't. Like, a lot of their albums have a lot of concepts around them, especially like the first one and the second one.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of his stuff like is very abstract.
Yeah, very
which
very verbose, very kind
actually
of yeah.
now I'm thinking about, I was thinking about this morning. When we talk about lyrics too, Deftones. Chino Moreno doesn't always like. I remember reading in an interview that his style isn't always to actually say anything, to make any single statement, but rather to sort of, make sort of tell what the song is trying to say, which doesn't always amount to any clear like thesis. Which I actually I really liked. I like that approach a lot because I think it's true to the music, and I think it's very honest in that way. But you can get a lot of emotion out of that at the same time because you're digging into what makes the music, what makes it, what makes you feel like this, or like like I'm thinking of like Be Quiet and Drive,
Yeah.
and just like that heart wrenching riff that like he manages to just really scoop into with his vocals. But when you look at it, it doesn't always make perfect sense. It's very very abstract, and more poetic than it is philosophical. Which go ahead.
No, I was gonna say exactly, and I think that kind of points to the fact that what constitutes. I mean, even going beyond, does lyricism matter? Is this important to the track? Does it add to it? Is the fact that what good lyricism means not only depends on the person, but it depends on the context.
Yeah.
Like the Smiths, for example. Morrissey's lyrics are very
Odd.
tongue in cheek and odd, and just kind of they're meant to be funny and just kind of satirical and snarky.
And I broke into the palace with a sponge and a rusty spanner.
Yeah, exactly, and it just it that type of lyrical approach wouldn't work in a myriad of other genres. But like it fits with that music, and it's kind of like if you had like a folk artist who used the type of lyrical style that Cannibal Corpse uses, that would sound very I mean, it'd be funny, but like
I would love that.
it'd be funny, it'd be humorous,
Actually,
but
there's actually a video online of this woman doing a classical version of like Hammer Smashed Face, I think, or some Cannibal Corpse song, and she's singing to it in just this pure falsetto.
that's interesting.
And it's actually really really well done. So kudos to her for taking that. But
But just to me, in terms of like in actual unique music, if someone were to, because I think part of why we think that's funny is because it kind of subverts expectations, and it kind of it recontextualizes something and makes it funny. But if for me, I don't know if I'd want to listen to, like when I listen to folk music, I don't want to hear horror movie themes.
okay, so why? So you don't like Nick Cave?
But I feel like he does okay,
Oh,
but it's no. It's not. That's not it's not the same as like the explicit, grotesque, details of
Yeah, of like Hammer Smash Face.
yeah,
or
PJ Harvey, for example, Down by the Water. That's a story about this. It's based off of like a folk story about a woman who drowns her daughter or something, and I forget why. I don't remember all the details. But like it's this very morbid kind of disturbing song, but the way she delivers it and her singing and the lyrics are very they fit. Like I feel like if that was a Cannibal Corpse song, it would talk about in explicit detail how she's like drowning her daughter and smash her face into a rock or something, and like that would make that song like really disturbing and not work. But the fact it's so sinister and creepy and just poetic makes the effect work in that context.
I guess I consider Nick Cave's lyricism to. I mean, it works with the music well, but it's just like at the same time, it's a little surreal.
Yeah.
In its way, because just like, I went out walking the other day, the night the night I spent amongst her bones, and I remembered my friend Nichelle and how they wrapped him in linoleum, like a bloody speech bubble, like a halo around his head, like just like very like it's just that song alone, Papa Won't Leave You Henry, is like there are some fucked up stuff that like are even out of place for that type of track.
True, but
if you really look into it. But I see what you mean though.
Yeah, but true, but like it doesn't reach. For example, Cannibal Corpse has a song on their album Tomb for the Mutilated called "Entrails Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt." Like
Fuck with a knife.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't reach that level of just like insane in your face.
I think for Cannibal Corpse, I think I think there's sort of like a morbid humor involved. Too.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because I mean, really, like I'm just thinking of like the gore grind and like the porno grind dudes, or which by the way, just quick side note, those should not be genre tags. Just saying, because lyrics should not define genre. That's just my personal opinion, but I think there's a lot of you can't go into something that dark without a lot of humor to it. It's almost like a Nightmare on Elm Street situation that like the first one is like oddly scary, but then as the series goes on, it gets like more comedic because it's just like they realize how ridiculous this entire fucking thing is. Just like like a burned to death child molester visiting people's dreams and killing them in somewhat ironic ways. Like like I don't know. There's just like there's a morbid there's a darkness to that humor. It's very it's gallows humor. Which I some people like it, some people don't. But I think I think that's part of the reason that they include that. I think I think some people like Black Dahlia Murder actually like sort of play around with the fact that it's sort of nuts of what they're talking about. Like I'm trying to think, what was that what's that song off of is it Miscarriage, I think? The track Miscarriage. What's that one that comes before? What's like their second album?
It's Miasma.
Yeah,
their
Miasma. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
debuts on Hell, and then yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There's that one track on that. I think it was something to do with an ape, right?
Statutory Ape, yeah.
Statutory ape. Thank you. Yeah, like I feel like they play around with it. So I don't know. It all depends on what they're doing. Actually, I really I gotta say I like irreverence in my lyrics a lot. Because I feel like so much lyricism today is just so up its own ass with meaning and intent
Mm-hmm.
that and I understandably so, because I mean if you just look at like the current landscape of the world, I even though I'm not necessarily in agreement with the way people think about it, I can understand why they think that. But like so I can understand if you wanted to make some sort of political point or what have you. But at the same time, it's like it just gets it turns into navel gazing very fast. Like it starts losing its meaning because so many people are talking about it. It's like like 100 voices speaking at their top lungs in the room. I mean, it's basically that's basically the internet nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it. So it's just for me personally, I can't stand seeing that same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So it's cool to see someone who just has sort of a sense of humor and doesn't care about what people think. And then there's people who just don't make any sense at all, like Scott Walker, who I just adore.
Yes, exactly. And I think it that kind of speaks to the point that lyrics really are that they're just so open ended. They're
Yeah.
so. I mean, lyrics that they're seem pretty straightforward. Sometimes they can be interpreted. Sometimes someone can be trying to make a political point and fail, or it can it can just not fit with the music, or it just seems odd, or even the person making it, even like for example, if like Miley Cyrus tried to come out with a fucking like political album, I think
She has tried to do some serious tracks before.
she's tried to do something, but like if she like came out with like a political concept album, in the vein of To Pimp a Butterfly or like something like that, like that would be
God.
because that's the thing is like
To Pimp a Cyrus.
exactly. But yeah, the messenger is just as important as the message as well. Who is delivering, kind of like my favorite punching bag, Kanye West. How on I'll admit it, on Yeezus, when he he had that song Blacks or New Slaves that everyone freaked out at.
Black Skinhead too.
That too, but New Slaves specifically, where he was talking about how everyone's so superficial and like focused on fashion and whatnot, and we don't care about brands. It's like, dude, that's like what you've been trying to do.
Yeah.
Like you've been trying to create a fashion career for the last like what? That's the thing. It is lyrics are not only about are they well written, do they make sense, are they thought provoking, do they fit the lyrics, do they fit the music? It also depends on who's delivering them and who they are as a person, the context of what they're saying. Kind of like Eminem recently has gotten a lot of flack because he's kind of I haven't listened to the new album because frankly what I heard was awful. But he when he was coming up, he had a lot of funny digs at celebrities because he wasn't there yet. He was punching up. He was making fun of celebrities, making fun of people who were above him. But on his recent stuff, he's been kind of punching down. Like he's made like pretty gross jokes about Iggy Azalea or whatnot, or like minor celebrities, and it just doesn't read as well. Because now like Eminem's one of the most popular and successful musicians, like let alone rappers. So it just doesn't it doesn't work as well. Like to hear Eminem make fun of Fred Durst when he was first coming out, or make fun of Britney Spears or whatever, or Christina Aguilera, like that was funny because he was attacking pop stars and like whatnot.
I honestly like I agree with the spirit of what you're saying, but I think I don't think it would be cool to stick a lyricist in a corner like that, because I'm just looking at like someone like Jay-Z, who for the most part has been pretty like gangster rap, typical thematical things to do with gangster rap and like hardcore hip hop. But then like on his newest album, he gets like pretty personal. So I even though we crack a joke about Miley Cyrus doing like a To Pimp a Butterfly type of thing. I feel like, if they did it and they did it well, like why would it matter?
No,
Like,
no, for sure.
yeah.
Like if like I think as corny as some of the lines were in Eminem's freestyle where he attacked Trump, some of the lines were pretty good and they landed and whatnot. So if he did make lyrics that it's attack celebrities still that were good, that's one thing, but they're not. And I think that was the point I was trying to make, is not only is he punching down, but like it feels too aggressive and too weird, and also his punchlines have just gotten cornier and cornier. So I mean,
Yeah.
for Eminem specifically, it's just a microcosm of issues.
See, this is sort of why I don't care about lyrics, because
There's almost too much to dissect.
well, yeah, I think there's that, but I think when I was just thinking about this when you were talking about Eminem, that like, I found it sort of weird that he came out with that cipher just sort of out of the blue, and like beforehand was not talking about Trump or anything, to do like politically. I mean, he has talked about political stuff. I can remember White America, for example, talks about like the Bush administration a little bit, but it's I just let like you think about their platform, like musicians have platforms now, and it's like dude, like I find that to be so disingenuous, and like it's not to say that musicians can't have a political opinion. It's just that like I think that they're sort of I think it's sort of they're being disingenuous to themselves in a way, because like I think there's more to it than your lyrics. Like I think if you're making music, I feel like your music is the most important thing in that. And I mean I really don't want to like I that's what I personally believe. Part of me sort of wishes it applies to everybody, but it really doesn't, because I think like you mentioned, like Immortal Technique is a really good example, who's call for music is inspired like by politics and by current events. So like, but it's just like it's this type of stuff that it's just like I feel like we get way too on board on this thing, and like at what point do we just not give a shit, like because I think that's sort of the problem today with modern lyricism, is that it's been completely, there's just this giant schism through the entire thing, because it's either you're super cerebral and you're fucking Kendrick, or you're just like idiotic like Lil Pump.
Yeah, exactly.
There's just no in between. And like I find that to be really annoying, because like I feel like it's the in between part that's probably the most important, because it's where you find that balance between like the two, like not to go on too much of a segue here, but like this is how I think about my own writing a lot, is that like in fiction we have we have like literary fiction, which I'm not a huge fan of the label, but whatever, that I feel like what makes literary fiction literary is the fact that it is it expresses a sort of philosophical ideal, and it has like quote unquote complex themes and things like that, and but at the same time like a lot of those books aren't really written well. Like a lot of them are just written really poorly, and they just don't try anything new. And my idea is to try to play with those two worlds, that to use the imagination that you find in like a science fiction book, but also find that thought that you find like literary fiction, and just put them together and find that balance between the two. Because I think if you go too far to one side, if you go to one side, you've got like pornography basically, because all you're doing is dealing with, like, you're just appealing to like the basest of human experience in a way. And then on the other side, you just have like that ivory tower where it's just like it's so up your ass pretentious that you sort of want to puke. So like this is exactly why I don't really bother with the lyrics as much. Like the times I've tried to make music, I have made purposely like nonsense lyrics because I'm like I don't care, like I just don't.
Yeah, I think kind of the or I guess my final point, or like my summation, is just kind of it can absolutely enhance music.
Yeah,
You know, lyricism can
definitely.
enhance the composition and whatnot. But it will never stand in as a replacement for music.
Yeah,
It will
and
never. Yeah.
I think it's also worth adding that it's it can enhance music, but at the same time it can also it's not a necessary enhancement. Like it's like saying how like having like clean perfect production is like necessary for every single genre of music when it's like
Yeah.
no like the whole point of shoegaze music was that it isn't dealing quite with that, like or at least that it plays around with that notion, or like like lo-fi or like noise rock. Like the whole point of those genres is that like they're defined by the fact that you're not playing like you're saying fuck you clean production in a way, and just doing what you want. And so I think there's sort of this pressure though nowadays that if you're a musician you have to have lyrics and they have to be thoughtful.
And that's not the case for every
for
genre.
yeah,
And
it's definitely not, but I think it's just like I think musicians don't realize that you don't always need lyrics in the first place.
especially if that's just not the type of artist you are, and you can't pull it
Exactly.
off. Like we've mentioned you mentioned Little Pump. Like I don't think Little Pump could make a make kind of like a Tim and Butterfly type album. I don't think he could make like a deep
To pimp a
socially
pump?
yeah, exactly. To pump a butterfly.
To pump a butterfly. Well, I'm trying to think of names for this now because I almost want this to happen.
To like say, okay, you got to make a concept album. Go ahead,
Well,
Little Pump.
like okay, so back in 2012 we were convinced that the Mayan calendar was saying that it was the end of the world, and I feel like we're just reading it wrong. It's actually, it was waiting for this moment. It was waiting for Little Pump to put out a
Yeah.
concept album. So
Exactly. Oh, jeez.
god damn it. Like that's definitely like you don't need to look at the news to see that the world's ending. All you have to do is just see if Little Pump came out with a concept album.
Exactly. Oh, jeez.
Oh, as my final thoughts, I just like I personally am not a huge fan of lyrics. I mean, I do like the ones I like, which is sort of like a redundancy to even say. Sort of
The ones I
circular
like,
logic.
yeah.
Yeah, but like to like I exactly they can, like you were saying, they can enhance an artist's music a lot. Like I think of like someone like Frank Zappa, who whose lyrics actually make his music even more fun than it already is.
Yeah.
And his lyrics have ranged from just nonsense stuff, like not necessarily nonsense, but just really silly, goofy situations, to something to very political stuff, like in the 80s when he was really railing against like the Reagan administration. So to like I think it's just musicians need to do what works for them, and I think we need to do as listeners what works for us, and if that means saying, hey, I don't really care what this guy's saying, then yeah, so be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then yeah. I mean that pretty much says it all. As integral as lyrics are to, or I guess as common and just kind of a long-staying element of music as they are, they just are not as important as quality music for me. And
so maybe the question becomes not do lyrics matter. The question becomes, do lyrics matter to you?
Yeah, because what the person's saying, how they're written, who's saying it, what the music is underneath it, all that matters just as much. So it really becomes your own judgment call about, are these lyrics speaking to me? Do they work for me? And do they matter? If even if they're not off the stuff, do they matter enough for me to turn off this album? Because there are points where the lyrics or the vocals, the delivery of the front man can supersede the music. But in general, it really is, it's up to interpretation.
Yeah, it really is. So before we leave, all that standard YouTube shit, like, subscribe. We're on iTunes because I'm not going to stop pimping for iTunes at this point. We're also on SoundCloud, but fuck them because iTunes is better. And yeah, just if you have a comment, just sound off. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear complaints and what have you.
But please tell us why we're wrong.
Exactly. I need that every day of my life. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys.
All right, peace out.
See you.